My name is Amber Wilson, 32, and until 6 months ago, I was just another laid-off financial analyst drowning in student loans and credit card debt. After losing my job at Morgan Stanley, I hit rock bottom eating ramen for dinner and dodging calls from bill collectors. I never imagined I'd be so desperate to ask my family for $150, or that my sister's mockery would be the least shocking part of my week. Before I tell you how I accidentally crashed a financial institution, drop a comment about your most embarrassing money moment. Don't forget to subscribe if you want more tales about the universe balancing the scales. I used to be the poster child for financial success. After graduating with honors from Wharton, I landed a coveted position at Morgan Stanley, one of Wall Street's most prestigious investment firms. My career trajectory was nothing short of meteoric, starting as a junior analyst. I climbed the ranks faster than anyone expected, becoming a senior financial analyst by my 29th birthday. My colleagues called me the Oracle for my uncanny ability to predict market trends. My annual bonuses could pay for a luxury car, and I lived in a sleek high-rise apartment with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park. My parents, a high school English teacher and a postal worker, couldn't have been prouder. They'd tell anyone who would listen about their daughter, the Wall Street whiz. My older sister Rachel, always competitive since childhood, seemed to be the only one unimpressed. While she'd done well for herself as a marketing executive, my financial success had finally given me something she couldn't match or minimize. For once, I wasn't living in her shadow. Then came Black Tuesday, not for the market, just for me. I walked into the office on a rainy April morning to find an unexpected meeting request from HR. Puzzled but not particularly concerned, I grabbed my coffee and headed to the 12th floor. The moment I saw the sympathetic smile of the HR director and the presence of my department head, I knew what was coming. "Amber, you've been an exceptional asset to the firm," my boss began, not quite meeting my eyes. "Unfortunately, due to the recent merger and subsequent restructuring, we're eliminating several positions across all departments, including yours." I sat there, stunned into silence as they explained the severance package, extended health benefits, and outplacement services. Everything sounded like it was coming through water. 2 security guards waited as I numbly packed my personal items into a cardboard box. Colleagues I'd worked alongside for years averted their gaze as I was escorted out of the building. Just like that, my career at Morgan Stanley was over. I wasn't worried initially. With my experience, performance record, and network, finding another position would be simple, right? I updated my LinkedIn profile, contacted headhunters, and began sending out applications that same afternoon. My severance would cover expenses for a few months, and I had some savings. This was just a temporary setback. But weeks turned into months, and despite dozens of interviews, nothing materialized. I'd make it to the final round only to be passed over for someone with more specialized experience, or the position would be filled internally, or the company would implement a hiring freeze. The financial sector was tightening its belt across the board. Meanwhile, my expenses didn't stop. The rent for my luxury apartment ate through my savings at an alarming rate. Student loans from my prestigious education still required monthly payments. Credit card bills mounted as I maintained appearances for interviews, buying new outfits, and paying for networking coffees I couldn't afford. I began cutting costs everywhere possible. First, I sold my car. I lived in New York, after all. Then I downgraded my phone plan, canceled streaming subscriptions, and started preparing all meals at home. When that wasn't enough, I moved out of my beautiful apartment and into a tiny studio in a less desirable neighborhood. I sold designer clothes, my expensive watch collection, and even some furniture on consignment. Throughout this downward spiral, I avoided telling my family how bad things had gotten. My parents would worry needlessly, and Rachel would relish my fall from grace. During our weekly phone calls, I maintained the fiction that I was consulting while considering my options. I made excuses to miss family gatherings, claiming work commitments that didn't exist. By the 6-month mark, reality became impossible to ignore. My account balance had dwindled to double digits. My refrigerator contained nothing but condiments and a half-empty carton of eggs. And then my car, the old Honda I'd kept from college days and recently started using again, developed a mysterious knocking sound that the mechanic said would cost $150 to diagnose, let alone fix. Without transportation, my job search would become nearly impossible. I needed that car, and to fix that car, I needed money I didn't have. After a sleepless night weighing my options, I made the hardest decision of my adult life. I would swallow my pride and ask my family for help. Just a small loan until I landed on my feet. Just $150 to get my car running again. Sunday dinner at my parents' modest suburban home had been a Wilson family tradition since I was in pigtails. The familiar scent of my mother's pot roast greeted me as I walked through the front door, my stomach immediately reminding me that I'd been subsisting on ramen and peanut butter for weeks. The house looked exactly as it always had, family photos lining the hallway, slightly worn furniture that prioritized comfort over style, and my father's collection of mystery novels overflowing their designated bookshelf. There she is. My father, David, rose from his recliner with open arms, his salt and pepper hair neatly combed for the occasion. The big-shot financial guru graces us with her presence. I forced a smile, the words stinging despite his good intentions. If only he knew how far I'd fallen. My mother, Evelyn, appeared from the kitchen, wiping her hands on her apron. "Amber, honey, it's been too long." She pulled me into a tight hug that smelled of home and security. "Sorry, I've been so busy," I lied, avoiding her eyes. "Work has been crazy." "Well, we're glad you made time for us, little people," came a voice from the dining room. Rachel, my older sister by 3 years, was setting the table, her diamond engagement ring catching the light with each movement. She'd recently been promoted to marketing director at her firm and never missed an opportunity to mention it. "Nice to see you too, Rach," I replied, mustering politeness. Dinner progressed with the usual family updates. Dad talked about his upcoming retirement plans. Mom shared neighborhood gossip, and Rachel predictably dominated the conversation with tales of her professional triumphs. "The CEO personally thanked me for the campaign," she was saying, cutting into her pot roast. "Said it was the most successful product launch they'd ever had. They're giving me a team of 5 to manage now, and there's talk of a company car." "That's wonderful, dear," Mom beamed. "How about you, Amber?" Dad turned to me. "How's that consulting business going?" I pushed mashed potatoes around my plate. "It's transitional. I'm exploring some new opportunities." Rachel arched an eyebrow. "Transitional? That sounds like corporate speak for not great." "Rachel," Mom cautioned. "What?" "I'm just saying, for someone who was supposedly such a financial genius, Amber seems awfully vague about her current situation. When was the last time you even mentioned a client?" My cheeks burned. This was exactly why I'd avoided family gatherings. Rachel had an uncanny ability to sense weakness and zero in on it like a heat-seeking missile. "Actually," I said, setting down my fork, "I wanted to talk to you all about something." My heart hammered in my chest as 3 pairs of eyes focused on me. "I'm in a bit of a tight spot right now." "What kind of tight spot?" Dad asked, concern immediately replacing his jovial expression. I took a deep breath. "The truth is, I lost my position at Morgan Stanley 6 months ago. During the merger, they eliminated my department." "Oh, honey," Mom's hand flew to her mouth. "Why didn't you tell us?" I was embarrassed, and I really thought I'd find something new quickly. But the market's been tough. I've been on dozens of interviews, but nothing's panned out yet. Dad reached across the table to squeeze my hand. "You should have told us sooner. We're your family." Rachel sat back in her chair, arms crossed. "So all this time when you've been too busy to come to dinner, you were actually unemployed?" "Wow." "Rachel, please," Mom scolded. I forced myself to continue before I lost my nerve. "My car's having issues, and I need it fixed to keep going to interviews. The mechanic wants $150 just to diagnose the problem. I hate to ask, but I was wondering if I could borrow just enough to get it running again. I'll pay you back as soon as I land something." An uncomfortable silence fell over the table. Dad cleared his throat. "Of course we can help, sweetie. That's what family is for." "Unbelievable," Rachel muttered, shaking her head. "The financial analyst needs a bailout. Isn't this ironic?" "Not now, Rachel." Dad warned, but she was just warming up. Remember when you lectured me about my 401k allocation at Christmas? Or when you told Mom and Dad they were financially illiterate for keeping their money in savings bonds? Some expert you turned out to be. That's enough, Mom said firmly. No, I think this is an important teaching moment, Rachel continued, her eyes gleaming with satisfaction. Can't even manage $150? Some financial analyst. Maybe if you hadn't been so busy showing off with your fancy apartment and designer clothes, you'd have some emergency savings. Each word was a knife twisting in my gut because she wasn't entirely wrong. I had overextended myself, confident in my job security and future earnings potential. And this isn't the first time, is it? Rachel pressed. Remember college? Mom and Dad helped you with tuition while I worked 2 jobs to pay my own way. That was different, I whispered, and they offered. Oh, I'll write you a check, Rachel announced, reaching for her purse. I'll write you a check right now, like a child's allowance. She made a show of pulling out her checkbook and a pen with her company's logo. $150. Consider it a lesson in humility. As she slid the check across the table, I couldn't bring myself to take it. The shame burned so hot I thought I might combust. This wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about power, and Rachel was making it clear who had it. Actually, I said, standing up so abruptly my chair nearly toppled. I've changed my mind. I'll figure something out. I looked at my parents, avoiding Rachel's triumphant expression. Thanks for dinner, Mom. It was delicious, as always. As I drove home in my knocking, sputtering car, I made a silent vow to myself. I would never put myself in that position again. I would eat nothing but rice for months before I'd ask for another dime, especially from Rachel. Somehow, I would claw my way back and reclaim my dignity, even if it meant taking a job well beneath my qualifications. Little did I know, the universe had its own plans for balancing the scales. 2 weeks after the humiliating family dinner, I was sitting cross-legged on the floor of my studio apartment, surrounded by job listings and rejection emails. My car had eventually died completely, forcing me to rely on public transportation, which added hours to my commute for interviews. I'd started applying for positions I would have scoffed at 6 months earlier: administrative assistant, bank teller, even retail. The knock at my door was so unexpected that at first, I thought I'd imagined it. Nobody visited me here. When it came again, more insistently, I peeled myself off the floor and peered through the peephole to see a courier in a crisp uniform. Amber Wilson? He confirmed when I opened the door. Yes? Certified letter for you. Signature required. He held out an electronic tablet. I scrawled my signature and accepted the heavy envelope, closing the door before examining it. The return address belonged to a law firm I didn't recognize. Harrington, Blackwell, and Associates, with an address in Boston. My first thought was that some debt had been sent to collections, though I'd been diligent about making minimum payments despite my circumstances. With trembling fingers, I broke the seal and extracted several sheets of heavy, cream-colored paper. The letterhead matched the envelope, and the date was just 1 week prior. Dear Miss Wilson, it began. It is our duty to inform you of the passing of your great-aunt, Elaine Harrington, on April 17th of this year. As the designated executor of Miss Harrington's estate, our firm has been instructed to contact you regarding your inheritance. I sank onto my second-hand sofa, confusion clouding my thoughts. Great Aunt Elaine? I had to search my memory for any recollection of this woman. There had been an elderly relative at a couple of family gatherings when I was young, my mother's aunt, who lived somewhere in New England. I remembered a dignified woman with silver hair and kind eyes who had asked me about my interest in mathematics when I was about 10. She said you were going to be something special with numbers one day, my mother had told me afterward. Aunt Elaine is quite successful, you know, never married, but built herself quite a life in Boston. That was it, 2 brief interactions spanning my entire life. Why would this woman leave me anything? The letter continued. Per Miss Harrington's last will and testament, you have been named the primary beneficiary of her estate. Due to the substantial nature of the assets involved, we request your presence at our offices at your earliest convenience to discuss the details of your inheritance. Please contact our office to arrange an appointment. Substantial nature? My heart began to race. What did that mean, a few $1,000s? Maybe enough to pay off my credit card debt and keep me afloat for another month or two. The thought sent a surge of hope through me that I quickly tamped down. Best not to get too excited. I called the law firm immediately, half expecting to get an automated system or a receptionist who would put me off. Instead, I was connected directly to Anthony Harrington himself, senior partner. Miss Wilson, I'm pleased you received our correspondence. When might you be available to meet in Boston? I could come tomorrow, I said, mentally calculating the cost of a bus ticket and wondering if my credit card could handle it. But before I make the trip, could you give me some idea of what substantial means in this context? There was a pause on the other end of the line. Miss Wilson, I'm afraid this is a matter best discussed in person. Let's just say that the assets are significant enough to warrant proper legal and financial planning. The firm will cover your travel expenses, of course, first-class train or airfare, whichever you prefer, and accommodation at the Langham. My mouth went dry. No one offered first-class travel and luxury hotels for a few $1,000s of inheritance. The next morning found me on an Amtrak train to Boston, wearing the one remaining business suit I hadn't sold, thankfully, my best Armani that I'd kept for important interviews. I'd spent the night researching the firm and discovered it was one of Boston's oldest and most respected, specializing in estate law for high-net-worth individuals. The Harrington, Blackwell, and Associates offices occupied the top 3 floors of a historic building in Boston's financial district. The reception area featured marble floors, leather furniture, and original artwork that looked museum quality. I gave my name to a poised receptionist who immediately stood. Miss Wilson, welcome. Mr. Harrington is expecting you. Please follow me. She led me to a corner office with sweeping views of Boston Harbor. Anthony Harrington, a distinguished man in his 60s, rose from behind an imposing mahogany desk. Miss Wilson, thank you for coming on such short notice. Please, have a seat. He gestured to a leather chair. May I offer you coffee, tea, water? Water would be fine. Thank you. As a junior associate delivered water in a crystal glass, I noticed several thick folders on Harrington's desk, all bearing my name. First, allow me to express my condolences for your great-aunt's passing, he began once we were alone. While I understand you weren't close, Elaine spoke of you with great fondness and admiration. She did? I'm afraid I only met her twice that I can recall. Harrington smiled. She kept tabs on you throughout your life, your academic achievements, your career. She was particularly impressed with your work in financial analysis. I shifted uncomfortably in my seat. I'm not sure that admiration would have held given my current circumstances. Actually, I think it would have. Elaine valued resilience above all else. He opened one of the folders. Now, regarding the matter at hand, your great-aunt was an exceedingly private person, which is why you likely weren't aware of her financial status. He slid a document across the desk. It was a statement from an investment account with a balance that made my eyes widen. This is just one of several accounts, Harrington continued. Elaine was an early investor in technology companies that have since become household names. Apple, Microsoft, Amazon. Small initial investments that grew exponentially over decades. I flipped through the statement pages, each showing 8- and 9-figure balances. My financial analyst brain tried to process the numbers, even as a sense of unreality washed over me. There are also real estate holdings, art collections, and various other assets. Harrington was still talking, but his voice seemed distant. In total, the current estimated value of your inheritance stands at approximately $4.2 billion. The water glass slipped from my fingers, spilling across the mahogany desk. Harrington calmly blotted it with a handkerchief as I struggled to find my voice. Billion? With a B? Yes, Miss Wilson. 4.2 billion, give or take depending on market fluctuations. Your great-aunt Elaine was one of America's secret billionaires. She believed wealth should be quiet and purposeful. I leaned back in my chair, feeling lightheaded. But why me? Why not my mother or other family members? Harrington slid another folder toward me. Inside was a letter, handwritten on the same cream-colored stationery. My dear Amber, it began. If you're reading this, I've moved on to whatever adventure awaits beyond this life. I've watched your journey from afar, your determination, your intelligence, your passion for finance. You remind me of myself at your age, though you've already achieved far more. When I was widowed at 26, I received a small insurance payout that I invested rather than spent. That decision changed the course of my life. I see in you the same capacity for vision and stewardship that I've tried to embody. This wealth has been a blessing and a responsibility. I entrust it to you now, confident you'll write your own story with it, one worthy of the woman I know you to be. With love and faith, your Aunt Elaine. Tears blurred my vision as I set down the letter. I'd barely known this woman, yet she'd seen something in me worthy of such extraordinary trust. The paperwork will take some time, Harrington said gently. There are tax considerations, transfer processes, accounts to be established. But we've initiated the first transfers to an account we've set up in your name. The initial sum of $1 billion should be available within 48 hours. The remainder will follow in stages over the coming weeks. $1 billion. Available in 48 hours. The room seemed to spin around me. This can't be real, I whispered. I assure you, Miss Wilson, it's very real. And it's just the beginning. I need a moment, I said, rising from my chair and walking to the window. Boston Harbor spread out before me, boats cutting white paths through the blue water. My reflection in the glass looked like a stranger, pale, wide-eyed, uncomprehending. $4.2 billion. The number was incomprehensible. That wasn't just wealth. It was a small nation's GDP. It was the kind of number that appeared in news headlines about tech moguls and oil dynasties. Not the kind of number that attached itself to Amber Wilson, currently unable to afford car repairs. This happens with most inheritors of substantial estates, Harrington said kindly from behind me. Take all the time you need. I turned back to him. I'm a financial analyst, or I was. I need to understand exactly what I'm looking at. Can you walk me through how great Aunt Elaine accumulated this level of wealth? Harrington nodded, seeming to appreciate my professional approach despite the circumstances. He opened another folder and extracted a timeline document. Elaine Harrington was widowed in 1962 when her husband, Jonathan, died in a car accident. She was 26 years old. The insurance policy paid out $45,000, a significant sum for the time. He handed me a yellowed insurance document. Rather than remarrying or living off the insurance as many expected, Elaine enrolled in investment courses. She was one of very few women in her classes. By 1970, she had turned that $45,000 into nearly $200,000 through careful stock investments. The next document showed an investment in Apple 1,000 shares purchased in 1980, shortly after the company went public. Elaine had a gift for recognizing revolutionary technology before others did. She continued to acquire Apple stock through the 1,980 seconds and never sold a single share. Similar documents followed Microsoft in 1986, Amazon in 1997, Google in 2004. Early, significant investments in companies that would transform the global economy. What had started as thousands became millions, and millions became billions, accelerating with each decade. Her strategy was remarkably straightforward, Harrington explained. Identify truly innovative companies, invest early, and never sell. No complex hedging strategies or exotic financial instruments. Just extraordinary patience and vision. He handed me another document, a real estate portfolio showing properties in Boston, New York, San Francisco, and London, all purchased decades ago in what were then emerging neighborhoods. The current market values made my head spin. Your great-aunt lived comfortably but modestly. Most of her wealth was continuously reinvested. She donated substantial sums to educational causes, particularly those supporting women in business and finance, but always anonymously. I began examining the documents with the critical eye I'd developed during my career. I checked for inconsistencies, verification stamps, registration numbers. Everything appeared legitimate. This wasn't an elaborate scam. It was simply an extraordinary truth. Why me? I asked again, still struggling to process it all. I have other family members. My mother is her niece. My sister Rachel is actually more successful than I am right now. Harrington smiled. Elaine kept detailed journals. She mentioned meeting you when you were 10 and being impressed by your natural affinity for numbers. She followed your academic career closely and was particularly proud when you entered finance. She saw herself in you not just your aptitude, but your independence. She could have told me, I said, a strange mixture of grief and gratitude washing over me. We could have known each other. Elaine valued her privacy above almost everything. Very few people knew the true extent of her wealth. She preferred it that way. Harrington closed the folder. She did make one additional request that I should mention. What's that? She hoped you would consider continuing her philanthropic work, particularly in supporting financial education for young women. It's not a condition of the inheritance, everything is yours unconditionally, but it was important to her. I nodded slowly, thinking of all the doors that had been closed to women in finance. Doors I'd fought to push through myself. I'd be honored to continue that work. The next few hours passed in a blur of paperwork. I signed dozens of documents, provided multiple forms of identification, and underwent a thorough verification process. By late afternoon, I had temporary access credentials to view the first set of accounts being transferred into my name. Using Harrington's computer, I logged in. There it was an account bearing my name with pending transfer. $1 billion clearly displayed. The transfer was scheduled to complete at midnight. Is this real? I asked again, unable to tear my eyes from the screen. Completely real, Harrington confirmed. By this time tomorrow, you'll have access to $1 billion. The remaining funds will transfer over the next few weeks as we work through the estate process. I left the law office in a daze, clutching a folder of documents and a new smartphone Harrington had provided for security purposes. He'd explained, showing me the banking apps and authentication systems already installed. The Langham Hotel welcomed me with deferential smiles, unaware that the modestly dressed woman checking in would soon be one of the wealthiest individuals to ever walk through their doors. I ordered room service, my first proper meal in weeks, and sat cross-legged on the king-sized bed, surrounded by inheritance papers. I didn't sleep that night. How could I? Every time I closed my eyes, numbers danced behind my eyelids, billions of dollars, thousands of shares, decades of compound growth. I kept checking the banking app, watching as the minutes ticked toward midnight. And then, at 12:01 a.m., the notification appeared. Transfer complete. $1 billion. Now in my name. My hands trembled as I stared at the balance, the zeros blurring together. Part of me still expected to wake up from this dream, back in my tiny studio apartment with my dwindling bank account and growing pile of rejection letters. But morning came, and the money remained. I was no longer just Amber Wilson, unemployed financial analyst. I was Amber Wilson, billionaire. And my first thought was crystal clear. I needed to withdraw exactly $150 and repay my parents for the offer they'd made before Rachel's mockery. It seemed fitting, somehow. A symbolic first act with my new wealth. Not a mansion or a yacht or any of the extravagances suddenly within my reach, but a simple repayment of a debt that had never technically been incurred. As I dressed in my Armani suit and prepared to check out of the hotel, I made a decision. No one would know about this inheritance yet, not my parents, not my friends, and especially not Rachel. First, I would go to my regular bank branch and withdraw that $150 in cash. I wanted to experience that small victory while still processing the enormous change in my circumstances. Little did I know that this simple transaction would set off a chain reaction that would make my modest request go viral within the banking system. I returned to New York the following afternoon, my mind still struggling to process the seismic shift in my reality. The familiar sights of the city, the crowded sidewalks, the honking taxis, the hot dog vendors all seemed strangely distant, as if I were watching them through glass. How could everything look exactly the same when everything had changed? My neighborhood bank branch was a small brick building wedged between a laundromat and a bodega. I'd been banking there since I moved to the city, and the tellers knew me by name. As I pushed through the glass doors, I felt an odd sense of power, knowing what they didn't, that I was now worth more than the entire financial institution and all its customers combined. Melissa, my regular teller, greeted me with her usual friendly smile. "Amber, good to see you. How's the job hunt going?" "Still looking," I said, maintaining the fiction of my old life for just a little longer. I just need to check my account balance and make a small withdrawal today. Sure thing. ID, please? I slid my driver's license across the counter and waited as she pulled up my account. The bank's records wouldn't yet reflect the astronomical sum that had been transferred overnight that was in the separate account set up by Harrington's firm. But the two banking systems were linked through my social security number and other identifying information. Melissa's brow furrowed as she stared at her screen. That's strange. The system is showing some unusual activity flags on your profile. Unusual activity? I echoed, trying to sound concerned rather than knowing. Nothing to worry about, probably just a glitch. Let me get my manager to take a look. She picked up her phone and spoke quietly, then gave me an apologetic smile. He'll be right out. Sorry for the delay. 5 minutes later, a balding man in a navy suit emerged from a back office. Miss Wilson? I'm David Keller, the branch manager. Would you mind stepping into my office for a moment? The manager's office was small but neatly kept, with family photos on the desk and framed banking certificates on the walls. He gestured for me to sit while he settled behind his computer. Miss Wilson, our system has flagged some unusual activity on your accounts overnight. It's showing a rather substantial transfer being processed. I nodded calmly. Yes, I've inherited some money from a relative. The estate attorneys initiated the transfer yesterday. Keller's fingers moved over his keyboard. I see. And was this transfer expected to be around $1 billion? Initially, yes. The full inheritance is approximately $4.2 billion, but it's being transferred in stages. The manager's fingers froze mid-type. He looked up at me, then back at the screen, then back at me again. I'm sorry, did you say $4.2 billion? With a B? That's correct. Keller loosened his tie slightly. Miss Wilson, you understand I'll need to verify this information. Large transfers like this trigger automatic security protocols. Of course, I have documentation from the law firm handling the estate. I reached into my bag and extracted the folder Harrington had prepared, sliding it across the desk. Keller examined the papers with increasing amazement. He picked up his phone and dialed. Janet, I need you to contact verification services immediately, and please ask Mr. Peters to join us. He hung up and gave me a strained smile. Our district supervisor will be joining us shortly. This is unprecedented for our branch. I understand. But all I really came in for today was to withdraw $150 cash. Keller blinked rapidly. $150? Just that? Just that, I confirmed. I promised to repay a family member. Right. Well, while we're waiting for verification, maybe I can interest you in our private banking services. Our wealth management team would be delighted. I already have a team of financial advisors through the estate, I said politely but firmly. Today, I just need $150. The office door opened, and a taller, older man in an expensive suit entered. Miss Wilson, Gregory Peters, district supervisor. It's a pleasure to meet you. He extended his hand, his entire demeanor radiating the special deference banks reserve for extraordinarily wealthy clients. Likewise, I said, shaking his hand. I understand you've come into a significant inheritance. On behalf of North Atlantic Bank, let me be the first to congratulate you. We're honored you've chosen us for your banking needs. Actually, I've been a customer here for 8 years, I pointed out. This is just the first time anyone's offered me a seat in the manager's office. Peters had the grace to look embarrassed. Of course, loyal customers are our foundation. Now, about this transfer, our system is showing some technical challenges processing a sum of this magnitude. Technical challenges? Keller cleared his throat. Our branch system is having difficulty reconciling the transfer with your existing account profiles. It's creating some cascading verification flags. What my colleague means, Peters interjected smoothly, is that a transfer of this size requires special handling. Normally, such transactions would route through our private banking division with advanced preparation. As they spoke, I noticed increased activity in the bank. Additional managers had appeared from back offices. Phones were ringing constantly. Tellers were huddled in conversation, occasionally glancing toward the manager's office. Is everything all right out there? I asked. Peters smiled tightly. Just a busy morning. Now, about your needs today. His phone rang, and he excused himself to answer it. stepping just outside the door. I could hear the tension in his lowered voice. Keller's computer chimed with an alert, drawing his attention back to the screen. That's odd. The system is showing unusual latency across all accounts now. When Peters returned, his composed facade had cracked slightly. Miss Wilson, it seems the verification process for your transfer has triggered some system-wide security protocols. It's creating a slight processing delay throughout our network. A slight delay? I repeated. Nothing to be concerned about. Now, you mentioned wanting to withdraw $150 today? That's right. I'd be happy to process that for you personally. He reached for a drawer, then paused as his phone rang again. This time, his expression turned grave as he listened. I see. Yes. Keep me updated. He hung up and fixed me with a strained smile. Miss Wilson, it appears our technical issues are a bit more extensive than initially thought. Through the office window, I could now see a gathering crowd of bank employees. The teller counters stood empty, and customers were looking around in confusion. What's happening? I asked. Peters exchanged glances with Keller. To put it simply, the verification protocols triggered by your inheritance transfer have cascaded through our security system. The entire network is, well, it's freezing up. I couldn't help it, I laughed. You're telling me my request to withdraw $150 has crashed your entire bank? Not just this branch, Keller said weakly. Early reports indicate it's affecting the entire North Atlantic banking network, possibly even connected institutions. As if on cue, Peter's phone rang again. His face paled as he listened. The Federal Reserve is calling an emergency meeting? Yes, I understand. We'll cooperate fully. He hung up and looked at me with new respect and a touch of fear. Miss Wilson, it seems your inheritance has inadvertently triggered a security failsafe in the banking system. When an amount this large appears suddenly, linked to a standard consumer account, it activates fraud prevention measures. Those measures are now causing a system-wide slowdown. So I can't withdraw my $150? I asked, barely suppressing a smile. I'm afraid all transactions are temporarily frozen while the system resets. It should resolve within 24 to 48 hours. Peters hesitated. In the meantime, perhaps we could offer you a courtesy advance? A corporate card for your immediate needs? I thought about my sister Rachel's mocking face as she wrote out that check. Her smug certainty that she would always have the upper hand. I thought about my parents' worried expressions, their genuine desire to help despite their modest means. No, thank you, I said, standing up. The $150 can wait until your systems are functioning again. It's only money, after all. As I walked out of the branch, leaving behind the increasingly frantic bank executives, I felt a strange sense of liberation. For 6 months, I'd been defined by what I'd lost my job, my status, my financial security. Now, through an extraordinary twist of fate, I had more money than I could spend in 100 lifetimes. Yet the first thing I'd wanted to do with that wealth was repay a tiny debt of pride and principle. That said more about who I was, who I wanted to be, than any number on a bank statement. My phone buzzed with a news alert. Breaking. Major bank network experiencing widespread system failure. I smiled to myself. Apparently, my small request had created quite the ripple effect. It was time to have that conversation with my family. But first, I needed to decide exactly how to handle Rachel and her condescension. $4 billion had given me leverage I'd never expected, and I intended to use it wisely. I called my parents that evening and asked if they could host another family dinner the following night. There's something important I need to discuss with everyone, I said, deliberately keeping my tone serious enough to ensure Rachel would attend, but not so grave that my parents would worry. Is everything all right, honey? Mom asked, concern evident in her voice. Better than all right, I assured her. I've had some developments I want to share in person. Dad chimed in on the extension. You found a job? Something like that, I replied, unable to keep a hint of amusement from my voice. I'll explain everything tomorrow, and please make sure Rachel comes too. This involves the whole family. The next evening, I arrived at my parents' house in a taxi, my Honda having finally given up the ghost entirely. I deliberately dressed in the same clothes I'd worn to the previous dinner. Simple jeans, a worn sweater, and boots with a slight scuff on the left toe. Nothing about my appearance suggested my transformation from struggling job seeker to one of the wealthiest women in America. Rachel's BMW was already in the driveway, gleaming under the porch light. I took a deep breath before ringing the doorbell, centering myself for what was to come. This wasn't about revenge. It was about recalibration. Mom opened the door, immediately enveloping me in a hug. "Come in, come in. We're all so curious about your news." The familiar scent of my mother's lasagna filled the house, and I found Dad and Rachel already seated in the living room. Rachel was checking her phone, barely looking up as I entered. "The mysterious sister arrives," she said with a smirk. "Found a job yet?" "Rachel," Dad admonished, "give your sister a chance to get through the door before starting in." I settled into an armchair, declining Mom's offer of a drink. "Actually, I wanted to talk to all of you about something important." That got Rachel's attention. She set down her phone and regarded me with barely concealed skepticism. "This sounds serious. You're not sick, are you?" "No, nothing like that." I took a deep breath. "I've recently come into some money." Dad leaned forward. "The job? That's wonderful, sweetheart." "Not exactly a job. It's an inheritance, actually. From great-aunt Elaine." Mom's eyes widened. "Elaine? My Aunt Elaine, who lived in Boston? I didn't even know she had passed. The family lost touch with her years ago. She died in April," I explained. "Her attorneys just located me recently." Rachel rolled her eyes. "Let me guess she left you her costume jewelry collection or some antique tea sets?" "Not exactly." I kept my voice level. "It turns out Aunt Elaine was quite wealthy. She made some very smart investments throughout her life." "How much are we talking?" Dad asked. "Enough to get you back on your feet for a while?" I hesitated, knowing that what I was about to say would change our family dynamic forever. The initial estimate from her attorneys is approximately $4.2 billion. The room fell completely silent. Mom's hand froze halfway to her mouth. Dad's jaw literally dropped. And Rachel simply stared at me as if I'd suddenly started speaking in tongues. "Very funny," she finally said. "What's the real amount?" "That is the real amount. Great-aunt Elaine was an early investor in Apple, Microsoft, Amazon, and other tech companies. She never sold her shares. Over decades, her investments grew exponentially." "You can't be serious," Rachel said. But there was uncertainty in her voice now. "I met with her attorneys in Boston yesterday. The first $1 billion has already been transferred into accounts in my name. The rest will follow in the coming weeks." Dad shook his head in disbelief. "Billion? With a B?" "Yes, Dad. With a B." I reached for my phone. "I have the documentation from the law firm if you'd like to see it." I pulled up the PDF files Harrington had sent me and handed the phone to my father. He scrolled through them slowly, his eyes growing wider with each swipe. "My God," he whispered, passing the phone to Mom. "This is real." Mom's eyes filled with tears as she looked at the documents. "I can't believe it, Aunt Elaine. I had no idea." "None of us did," I said. She valued her privacy. According to her attorneys, very few people knew the extent of her wealth. Rachel, who had been uncharacteristically silent, suddenly stood and came to look over Mom's shoulder at the phone. Her face paled as she scrolled through the legal documents, the bank statements, the transfer confirmations. "This is a mistake," she said, but her voice lacked conviction. "They must have the wrong person. Why would she leave everything to you? You barely knew her." She left me a letter explaining her decision. I recounted what Harrington had told me about Elaine seeing herself in me, about her following my career, about her belief in my ability to steward her fortune responsibly. As I spoke, I watched Rachel's expression shift from disbelief to something more complicated, a mixture of shock, envy, and the dawning realization that the power dynamic between us had irrevocably changed. "So you're a billionaire now," she said flatly. Just like that, just like that." I confirm. "Well, this is wonderful news," Mom exclaimed, always the peacemaker. "We should celebrate. I'll open that bottle of champagne we've been saving." As she hurried to the kitchen, Dad squeezed my hand. "I'm happy for you, Amber. Though I imagine it's a lot to process." "It is," I agreed. "I'm still in shock myself." Rachel had retreated to the far side of the room, arms crossed defensively. "I suppose you'll be moving to some mansion now, flying private, joining the billionaire club. Actually, my first priority was coming here tonight, I said, looking directly at her. Remember when I asked to borrow $150 for my car repair? And you mocked me for it? Her cheeks flushed. Amber, You humiliated me, I said quietly. You took pleasure in seeing me struggle. Dad cleared his throat uncomfortably. Girls, maybe this isn't the time. No, Dad, it is the time, I insisted, keeping my eyes on Rachel. Yesterday, I went to my bank to withdraw exactly $150 to repay you and Mom for the offer you made before Rachel interrupted with her checkbook. Do you know what happened? Rachel shook her head silently. The bank's entire system crashed. Apparently, when you link a regular checking account to a billion-dollar transfer, it triggers all sorts of security protocols. The whole bank froze not just my branch, but the entire network. It made the national news. I saw that on Twitter, Dad said, amazed. That was because of you? That was because I wanted to withdraw $150 to repay a debt of principal. I finally looked away from Rachel to include both my parents. Money changes things, I know that, but I want you both to know that it won't change how much I love you, or my gratitude for everything you've done for me. Mom returned with champagne and glasses, her eyes still shining with tears. Oh, honey, we know that. And Rachel, I continued, turning back to my sister, I don't want this to drive us further apart, but I do want you to understand something. True wealth isn't measured by account balances or job titles or who can look down on whom. It's measured by how you treat people when they're at their lowest. Rachel's composure finally cracked. So that's it? You're a billionaire now, so you get to lecture me on morality? You win, Amber. Is that what you want to hear? This isn't about winning, I said. It's about growing. Both of us. Easy for you to say from your new golden throne, she snapped. But I could see the hurt beneath her anger. What happens now? You buy yourself a private island and forget about your regular, boring family? Actually, I said, accepting a glass of champagne from Mom, I'm thinking of starting a foundation. Great Aunt Elaine was passionate about financial education for women. I'd like to continue her legacy. A foundation, Rachel repeated. How noble. Rachel, that's enough, Dad said firmly. Your sister is sharing life-changing news with us. The least you can do is be supportive. Rachel's phone buzzed, and she glanced at it, then did a double take. You've got to be kidding me. She held up the screen showing a news alert. Mystery billionaire inheritance causes banking system glitch. It's already hitting the financial news. I should go, I said, setting down my barely touched champagne. The attorneys warned me this would attract attention once the transfers became public knowledge. I wanted you all to hear it from me first. But you just got here, Mom protested. We haven't even had dinner. I know, and I'm sorry. But I have some things to take care of. I hugged her tightly. I promise we'll have a proper celebration soon. As I moved toward the door, Rachel stepped into my path. Her expression was unreadable. Amber, she began, then hesitated. I'm sorry about the way I acted last time. About the $150. It was cruel. I studied my sister's face, trying to gauge her sincerity. Was this a genuine apology, or simply an adjustment to new circumstances? Either way, it was a start. Thank you for saying that, I said finally. It means a lot. As I turned to leave, Rachel called after me. Will you at least let me drive you home? In my suddenly very unimpressive BMW? Despite everything, I found myself smiling. Actually, I have a car waiting. But rain check? I left my parents' house that night with mixed emotions. The look on Rachel's face when she realized the magnitude of my inheritance had been satisfying in a way I wasn't entirely proud of. But this wasn't the end of our story, it was just the beginning of a new chapter. How we wrote it would depend on choices we both made going forward. As for me, I already knew my first major decision as a billionaire. I would need to find a new bank. The call came at 6:15 the following morning, rousing me from the first truly peaceful sleep I'd had in months. The hotel room I'd upgraded from my studio apartment to a suite at the Four Seasons until I decided on more permanent accommodations was still dark, the blackout curtains keeping out the early dawn light. Miss Wilson? This is Michael Thornton, North Atlantic Bank's Chief Operating Officer. I apologize for the early hour, but we have an urgent situation requiring your attention. I sat up, instantly alert. What kind of situation? The, incident from yesterday has escalated significantly. Our entire banking network remains in lockdown mode. The security protocols triggered by your inheritance transfer have created what our technical team is calling a cascading authentication failure. We need you to come in immediately. 45 minutes later, I walked into North Atlantic's corporate headquarters in Midtown Manhattan. The gleaming skyscraper usually projected an aura of unshakable financial stability. Today, the lobby buzzed with barely contained panic as executives in rumpled suits, clearly having worked through the night, hurried between conference rooms. A harried assistant escorted me to the 47th floor, where I found myself in a crisis command center. Dozens of monitors displayed graphs and code sequences. Technology specialists hunched over keyboards while banking executives paced anxiously, phones pressed to their ears. Michael Thornton, a silver-haired man with the tired eyes of someone who hadn't slept in 24 hours, broke away from a huddle of suits to greet me. "Miss Wilson, thank you for coming so quickly. I'm afraid the situation has become rather complicated." "So I gather," I said, gesturing to the chaos around us. "What exactly is happening?" He guided me to a private conference room where several other executives waited, along with a team of people introduced as the bank's top IT security specialists. "To put it simply," said a woman introduced as Dr. Lakshmi Patel, Chief Information Security Officer, "your inheritance transfer triggered an unprecedented sequence of security alerts. The system detected what it interpreted as a potential money laundering operation due to the sudden appearance of such an enormous sum. But the transfer was legitimate," I pointed out. "All the documentation was verified." "Yes, but the verification itself created problems," another tech specialist explained. "Our system is designed to cross-reference with multiple financial databases when large transfers occur. When it tried to verify a billion-dollar transfer to a personal account that previously had a four-figure balance, it essentially created a logic loop." Thornton took over. "Think of it like this. The system flagged the transfer as suspicious, which triggered enhanced verification, which detected the size discrepancy, which escalated the security level, which triggered more verification, and so on. Eventually, the processing demand overwhelmed our servers. And it's not just our systems," added another executive grimly. "The verification protocols connect to other financial institutions. The Federal Reserve is involved now. Several major banks are reporting similar issues." I struggled to process the implications. "Are you saying my inheritance has paralyzed the banking system?" "Not the entire banking system," Dr. Patel clarified, "but a significant portion of the East Coast banking network. Yes, your case has exposed a previously unknown vulnerability in how our systems handle transfers of this magnitude to retail accounts." "What do you need from me?" I asked. "We need your authorization to isolate and reroute the transfer through specialized channels designed for ultra-high net worth clients," Thornton explained. "Essentially, we need to create a custom pathway for your funds that bypasses the standard verification protocols." For the next several hours, I worked alongside the bank's team, signing documents, providing verification, and following their technical guidance. My background in financial analysis proved unexpectedly valuable as I helped translate between the banking executives and IT specialists, bridging the gap between financial and technical jargon. By mid-afternoon, progress was evident. Monitors showed systems gradually coming back online, verification processes resuming normal operations. "We've isolated the issue," Dr. Patel announced. "The fix is propagating through the network now." A collective sigh of relief swept through the room. Thornton approached me with a weary smile. "Miss Wilson, I can't thank you enough for your cooperation today. Your expertise was instrumental in resolving this." "Happy to help fix a problem I apparently caused," I replied with a small smile. He chuckled. "You didn't cause it. The system's inability to handle your extraordinary circumstances caused it. Which brings me to my next point." He hesitated, then continued. "North Atlantic Bank would be honored to continue serving your financial needs through our ultra-private client division. We have extensive experience with high net worth individuals. After today's events, You still want me as a client? More than ever. You've demonstrated remarkable composure and intelligence under pressure. Those are qualities we value highly. I considered his offer. I appreciate that, Mr. Thornton, but I think I need to evaluate all my options. This inheritance comes with responsibilities. I'm just beginning to understand. Of course. He nodded respectfully. Whatever you decide, please know that today's incident will lead to significant improvements in our systems. Your inheritance has inadvertently made the entire banking network more robust. As I prepared to leave, a news alert appeared on one of the monitors. Banking glitch resolved. Mystery billionaire inheritance confirmed. My anonymity was evaporating faster than I'd anticipated. Outside, I found reporters gathered at the building's entrance, alerted by the unusual activity at the bank's headquarters. A forest of microphones greeted me as I emerged. Miss Wilson, is it true you've inherited billions? Did your wealth really crash the banking system? What are your plans for the money? I stopped, considering how to respond. My financial analyst training had always emphasized discretion and understatement. But Great Aunt Elaine's letter had mentioned responsibility and stewardship. Perhaps that started with owning my new reality. Yes, I have recently inherited a substantial estate, I acknowledged calmly. And yes, it did create some temporary technical challenges that have now been resolved. Beyond that, I'm still developing my plans. Excuse me. As my newly hired security team escorted me to a waiting car, my phone began buzzing incessantly with notifications. The story was spreading rapidly across social media and news outlets. My former colleagues from Morgan Stanley, distant acquaintances, even old classmates, everyone was suddenly trying to reach me. Among the flood of messages, one caught my eye. Rachel had sent a text. Saw you on CNBC just now. Quite an entrance into the billionaire club. Call me? I closed the notification without responding. Rachel would need to wait. There were more pressing matters at hand. Back at my hotel suite, I found a team of professionals waiting for me, specialists Harrington had arranged to help manage my sudden wealth. A financial advisor, an accountant, a security consultant, and a public relations expert. Miss Wilson, the PR specialist began. We need to develop a strategy for handling media inquiries. Your story has captured public attention, the ordinary woman who accidentally crashed a bank with her inheritance. People are fascinated. I don't want to be a spectacle, I said firmly. I want to be thoughtful about this wealth and how I use it. Exactly why we need a clear communication strategy, she insisted. If you don't control your narrative, others will create one for you. Over the next several hours, we outlined initial plans. I would establish a family office to manage the inheritance professionally. A significant portion would be allocated to a new charitable foundation focused on financial education for women and girls, honoring Elaine's wishes. The remainder would be prudently invested, with an emphasis on socially responsible holdings. As the team departed with action items assigned, I finally found a moment of solitude. My phone continued to buzz with messages, including 5 more from Rachel, each increasingly urgent. I scrolled through them. Seriously, call me when you get a chance. Mom and Dad are being bombarded with calls from reporters. We should coordinate what we're saying to people. Amber, please respond. This affects all of us. I'm sorry, okay? I was wrong. Please call. The last message gave me pause. Was it genuine remorse, or simply a reaction to my new circumstances? Either way, Rachel was right about one thing: this situation affected our entire family. I needed to help them navigate it. I dialed her number, and she answered on the first ring. Finally, are you okay? It's absolute madness out there. I'm fine, I assured her. Just overwhelmed. How are Mom and Dad? Journalists camped on their lawn until the police asked them to leave. Dad's enjoying the attention a little too much. Mom's worried about you. I'll call them next. Rachel, I'm putting together a team to handle all this. I'll make sure they have support too. There was a pause before she responded. Amber, I need to say something. I've been thinking about how I treated you. Not just at that dinner, but for years. It wasn't right. Rachel. No, please let me finish. I've always been competitive with you. Always needed to feel like I was winning, like I was better. And when you were struggling, I liked it. It made me feel superior. That's a horrible thing to admit. But it's true, and I'm sorry. The sincerity in her voice surprised me. Thank you for saying that. It means a lot. I don't expect us to suddenly be best friends, she continued. But maybe this can be a fresh start? On more equal footing? I'd like that, I said, realizing I meant it. Though the footing isn't exactly equal anymore. She laughed, a genuine sound I hadn't heard from her in years. No, I suppose not. But maybe that's what we needed, something so dramatic it broke our old patterns completely. After we hung up, I sat looking out at the Manhattan skyline as twilight descended. In just a few days, my life had transformed beyond recognition. I'd gone from struggling to pay my electric bill to crashing banking networks with my wealth. I'd seen my sister's worst qualities, and perhaps the beginning of her best. Tomorrow would bring meetings with foundation consultants, real estate agents showing exclusive properties, and financial strategists outlining investment approaches. I would begin the process of learning how to be not just wealthy, but meaningfully wealthy. How to use these resources to create positive change rather than just personal comfort. For tonight, though, I simply sat with the enormity of it all, remembering the great aunt I'd barely known who had seen something in me worth entrusting with her legacy. I hoped, wherever she was, that Elaine Harrington was pleased with her choice. 6 months later, I stood in the sunlit corner office of the Elaine Harrington Foundation for Financial Empowerment, gazing out at the Hudson River. The foundation occupied the top floor of a renovated historic building in the meatpacking district, beautiful but not ostentatious. Exactly the balance I'd been trying to strike in all aspects of my new life. The transition from unemployed financial analyst to billionaire philanthropist had been dizzying, exhausting, and exhilarating all at once. After the initial banking chaos settled, the real work began. Assembling the right team, establishing legal structures, defining mission statements, and making countless decisions about how to steward this extraordinary wealth responsibly. I'd hired Lisa Chen, a brilliant nonprofit executive with experience in both finance and education, as the foundation's CEO. Under her leadership, we'd already launched pilot programs in financial literacy for high school girls, scholarships for women pursuing careers in finance, and microloans for women entrepreneurs from underserved communities. Today was special. My parents were visiting the foundation for the first time. As I watched their car pull up outside, I felt a wave of gratitude. Throughout the whirlwind of the past 6 months, they had remained my anchors to reality. "This is incredible, honey," Mom said minutes later, turning slowly in the center of the office, taking in the open workspace where 24 staff members collaborated on foundation projects. "Your great aunt would be so proud." Dad squeezed my shoulder. "We certainly are. You've handled all this with remarkable grace." "I've tried," I said, leading them to the conference room where lunch awaited. It hasn't always been easy. The public attention was overwhelming at first. The media fascination with my story had eventually died down, but not before the bank-breaking billionaire had become a temporary sensation. I'd done one carefully managed interview with a respected financial publication, then declined all other requests, preferring to let the foundation's work speak for itself. "And how are things with Rachel?" Mom asked cautiously as we sat down to eat. That was the more complicated question. After our phone conversation, the day of the banking crisis, Rachel and I had begun the slow process of rebuilding our relationship, this time with more honesty and less competition. We'd established clear boundaries, no financial entanglements, limited contact at first, and complete transparency about our feelings. "Better," I answered truthfully. "We had coffee last week." She started seeing a therapist to work through some of her competitive issues. Not just with me, apparently it's been affecting other relationships too. "That's good to hear," Dad said. "She seems different lately, more at peace with herself." "She actually apologized," I added, still somewhat amazed by the memory. A real apology, not just for the $150 incident, but for years of putting me down to build herself up. She said the inheritance was a wake-up call. Seeing how quickly the power dynamic could shift made her realize how meaningless it all was. "And you've forgiven her?" Mom asked. I considered this carefully. "I'm working on it. Trust takes time to rebuild, but we're in a better place than we've been since childhood." After lunch, I gave my parents a tour of the foundation, introducing them to key staff members and explaining our initiatives. In the main workspace, a large portrait of Elaine Harrington hung on the wall, a dignified woman with intelligent eyes and a subtle smile. I'd commissioned it based on old photographs the attorneys had provided. "You know," Mom said, studying the portrait, "I wish I'd known her better. She always seemed so independent, so ahead of her time." I remember family members whispering about poor Elaine after her husband died, assuming she'd struggle on her own. None of us had any idea what she was building. "That's why our first scholarship program is named after her," I explained. "The Elaine Harrington Independent Scholarships. For young women who demonstrate that same spirit." After my parents departed, promising to return for the Foundation's official launch gala the following month, I drove to Greenwood Cemetery in Brooklyn. I'd arranged for Elaine's remains to be transferred there from Boston, to a peaceful spot beneath a maple tree. The simple yet elegant headstone read, "Elaine Margaret Harrington, 1936 to 2023. Visionary, mentor, philanthropist." I placed a bouquet of lilies which Harrington had mentioned were her favorite against the stone. "I hope I'm doing this right," I said quietly, "using what you gave me the way you would have wanted. I wish I could ask you so many questions." I paused, feeling a little self-conscious talking to a headstone, but needing to express my gratitude nonetheless. "Thank you for seeing something in me worth trusting. I promise I won't let you down." On my way back to Manhattan, I stopped at a small neighborhood center in Brooklyn where the foundation was funding a financial literacy workshop for single mothers. The instructor, a former bank manager with a gift for explaining complex concepts simply, was walking participants through the basics of emergency funds and retirement planning. I slipped into a seat at the back, not wanting to disrupt the session. A young woman beside me, perhaps 25, was taking careful notes while occasionally glancing at a photo of a toddler set as her phone background. During a break in the workshop, she turned to me, unaware of who I was. "This stuff is life-changing, isn't it? I never learned any of this growing up. My parents lived paycheck to paycheck, and so have I. But I want better for my daughter." I smiled, thinking of Elaine's journey from young widow to silent billionaire. "It really is. Financial knowledge is power. It's freedom." "Exactly." She nodded enthusiastically. "I'm putting away just $25 a week right now. It's not much, but it's a start." I reached into my purse and pulled out a check I'd written earlier that day for exactly $150. "Sometimes a small amount makes all the difference. This is for your emergency fund. No strings attached." She stared at the check in confusion. I can't accept this. I don't even know you." "Consider it paying forward a lesson I learned the hard way," I said, standing to leave. "Sometimes the value of money has nothing to do with the amount." Back at my apartment, a beautiful but not extravagant 3-bedroom in Tribeca that I'd purchased after months of living in hotels, I reflected on the profound journey of the past 6 months. The inheritance had changed every aspect of my external life, from where I lived to how I spent my days. But the more significant changes had been internal. I'd learned that wealth amplifies who you already are. It doesn't fundamentally change you. Those with generous spirits become more generous. Those with insecurities find new ways to express them. I'd learned that money reveals character both in yourself and in others. Some former colleagues who'd barely acknowledged my existence after my layoff were suddenly my dearest friends again. Others who'd been kind during my struggles remained exactly the same after my windfall. Those were the people I kept close. Most importantly, I'd learned that true wealth isn't measured in dollars. It's measured in purpose, in relationships, in the impact you have on others. Great Aunt Elaine hadn't just left me money. She'd left me a mission and the means to fulfill it. My phone chimed with a calendar reminder. Tomorrow morning, I was speaking at a high school in Queens about careers in finance. Then lunch with Rachel, our new monthly tradition as we carefully rebuilt our relationship, followed by a foundation board meeting to review grant applications. It was a full life, a purposeful life. Not the one I'd imagined when I sat cross-legged on the floor of my tiny studio apartment, drowning in rejection letters. But perhaps the one I was always meant to find. And it had started with the humiliating request for $150 and a sister's mockery that had inadvertently set in motion events beyond anyone's imagination. Life's path rarely follows a straight line. So, what lessons would I share with you after accidentally crashing a bank with my inheritance? That money matters far less than how you treat people. That family relationships are worth the hard work of repair. That purpose outweighs luxury every single time. And that sometimes the universe has a sense of humor about balancing the scales. Before you go, I'd love to hear your thoughts on what you'd do if you suddenly came into unexpected wealth. Would you change your life completely or stay the course? Would old relationships survive the transformation? Drop a comment below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories about life's unexpected turns. Thanks for spending this time with me, and remember, it's not about how much you have, but how much you give. Until next time.